Energy Improvements in Rural or Remote Areas, ERA Grant Funding Opportunity. I am Taniqua Hay, the Stakeholder Engagement Lead for the ERA program, and I will be kicking us off today. First, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the U.S. Department of Energy OCED website. All participants are in listen-only mode. To turn on live captions, please click on Show Captions in your control panel. Finally, a copy of today's presentation will be posted on the OCED website, and a link will be posted on OCED Exchange under this FOA's post. The recording of today's session will also be available in the coming weeks. The purpose of this webinar is to share common issues observed in the pre-applications submitted to the OCED Energy Improvements in Rural or Remote Areas FOA 3045, as well as highlight other funding and technical assistance opportunities that may be of interest. Please note, we will only share publicly available information in the webinar. This webinar is for informational purposes only. The department is not seeking comments on the information, and FOA full applications will be due on October 26, 2023. Attending the webinar and watching the recording are completely voluntary and will not impact an applicant's selection. Participating in the webinar today won't provide any additional advantages or disadvantages to the application evaluation process. And if there are any inconsistencies between the FOA and the statements in this webinar, the FOA is the controlling document and your appropriate reference. So although we aren't taking questions and feedback today, we do suggest that you submit any questions you have to the ERA Grant Funding Opportunity Announcement email. And that's eragrant@hq.doe.gov. I want to take time to personally thank everyone who is participating on this webinar today and for your interest in the ERA program. And I want to especially thank all of those who took time to submit pre-applications. The number and diversity of locations exceeded our team's expectations and shows the incredible amount of interest and excitement for this program and our mission. These pre-applications represent steps forward to improving clean energy reliability and affordability in some of our country's most energy vulnerable areas. Areas with frequent power outages, expensive energy costs, and few options to improve a community's energy situation without substantial funding. With the highly desirable no-cost shared structure of this $50 million grant funding opportunity, we received an immense amount of interest reflected in the high number of pre-applications received, making this round of pre-applications extremely competitive. Our hope is that with this funding opportunity and with the ERA program at large, is that the call to action will produce substantial solutions for the unique energy challenges found in rural and remote communities by demonstrating community-driven clean energy projects to improve the resiliency and stability of our country's rural and remote energy systems. Now, let's take a step back. As many of you know, OCED was established in December 2021 by the bipartisan infrastructure law to scale the clean energy technologies needed to tackle our nation's most pressing climate challenges and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. We received more than $25 billion for demonstration projects from the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, and Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, with the $1 billion allocated to the ERA program. Now, OCED's mission is to deliver clean energy demonstration projects at scale in partnership with the private sector to accelerate deployment, market adoption, and the equitable transition to a decarbonized energy system. Now, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Regina Gaylor, the ERA Program Manager. Regina will give more background about the ERA program and the grant funding opportunity.
Thank you very much, Taniqua. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank the whole engagement team for making this possible today. So Taniqua laid the groundwork and introduced you to our objectives for this webinar. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this Energy Improvements in Rural or Remote Areas program. I'll have a quick overview of the program, and then we'll talk about the grant FOA. So we say ERA, E-R-A, as a short nickname for our program. And as Taniqua explained, the ERA program is housed within, it's part of this Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. Broadly speaking, this Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, or OCED, is here to provide financial investment, technical assistance, and other resources that advance clean energy systems, clean energy transition through these demonstration projects in rural and remote communities. We say that we have 3 goals we're working for through all of the projects that we'll fund. The first is to deliver measurable benefits to energy customers across rural and remote America. We say by funding what will be replicable projects that lower costs, improve access to energy and resilience of energy systems, and reduce environmental harm. The second general goal, specific goal, is to support new rural and remote energy system models that use these climate resilient technologies, business structures that promote resilience, new financing mechanisms, or community engagement practices. The third goal is to build knowledge, capacity, and self-reliance in these green energy systems, clean energy, across rural America. Next slide, please. So a little bit more on this specific funding opportunity announcement. We say FOA. We call this our grant FOA. This grant funding opportunity, specifically for community-based projects that would be valued $500,000 to $5 million, was created, we hope, to reduce barriers for participation. We put out a streamlined application process that we hope would make this funding more accessible. And we put out, critically, no cost share requirements in this funding opportunity. Next slide. So I'm going to run through what our key objectives are. So we call this our A through F list. And all of the projects that we fund through this ERA program will have to satisfy at least one of the objectives in this A through F list. This is our list that is given to us directly out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this specific ERA program is a specific section of the law 40103C3. The clean energy objectives are A, improving overall cost effectiveness of generation, transmission, or distribution systems. B, siting or upgrading transmission and distribution lines. C, reducing greenhouse gas emissions from generation. D, providing or modernizing generation facilities. E, developing microgrids. Or F, increasing energy efficiency generally. Next slide, please. So I'll tell you a little bit about the outcome of our pre-application round for this grant FOA. And the following types of pre-applications were deemed non-responsive. So the pre-applications that fall into one of the categories in these bulleted lists did not respond to our FOA, we deemed, in that they did not meet some of the requirements that were critical. So the first category, pre-applications that propose projects outside the technical parameters that were specified in the FOA. Section 1.2 is the part of the FOA that contains that A through F list that I ran through. The second set of pre-applications that we deemed not responsive to the FOA were those that presented projects that didn't benefit at least one rural or remote area. You had to describe benefits to at least and identify at least one rural or remote area. And the parameters for the rural and remote areas are described in FOA section 3.0. The pre-applications for the proposed technologies that are not based on sound scientific principles also were deemed non-responsive. Second to the last category here, non-responsive were pre-applications for technologies that are not commercially available. Remember, we are seeking out and funding demonstration level energy generation systems, and they should be commercially available. So the last group of pre-applications that were deemed non-responsive were those whose projects included R&D phase or pilot scale activities, not advanced commercially available technologies that we are looking to fund through this program. The pre-applications that we reviewed were evaluated against the criteria that are listed in the FOA. The two criteria for these pre-applications were: one, project benefits, that was worth 45% of the score, and two, technical approach. So project benefits were worth 45%, and technical approach in the pre-apps was worth 55% of the score. Next slide, please. So as Taniqua had mentioned, the quantity of pre-applications and the geographic diversity of the pre-applications that came in really exceeded our expectations. We believe they showed a lot of interest in the public and excitement for the program, for the OSID mission. We're grateful for that. Let's get to the bottom line. We reviewed 659 pre-applications across all regions of the country and including 4 territories. 59 of those 659 eligible pre-applications were invited to submit a full application. So in addition to thinking about the 59 out of 659 that were invited, approximately $2.4 billion of federal funding was requested through those projects. That's about 48 times the size of the funding we have available for this FOA. This is a $50 million FOA. Thank you for listening. I'm going to pass the floor to Project Manager Alyssa Kay, and she's going to go over some more general pre-application feedback themes. Thank you.
Thanks, Regina. My name is Alyssa Kay, and I'm the project manager for this FOA. DOE identified themes and common points of feedback for factors that affected scoring in the pre-applications and are important for applicants to keep in mind when developing full applications. The full application is an opportunity to expand on the technical, commercial, financial, management, and community benefit details of the ideas submitted in the pre-application. It's our goal to support all of you to our greatest extent within our legal framework to develop the best applications possible. To that end, I would like to introduce Lolita Crawford, the Financial Assistance Director, who will help to present the pre-application feedback themes. Go ahead, Lolita.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. So there are 8 feedback themes, and so let's go ahead and dive in. The first one is rural and remote areas to receive project benefits. Applications must identify one area in the United States, including US territories, with a population of not more than 10,000 inhabitants using 2020 Census Bureau figures. Applications must clearly identify the rural and remote area with fewer than 10,000 inhabitants to benefit on page 1 of the project overview of the full application. Applicants must use the 2020 Census Bureau data. Applications that do not satisfy this requirement will be considered ineligible and removed from further evaluation. In addition, applicants that propose a single facility project must clearly demonstrate how the project is available to and benefits the public. For example, at least one rural and remote area of not more than 10,000 inhabitants. Next slide, please. Second thing, project impact. Applicants must describe any potential negative impacts of the proposed project, including negative impacts to vulnerable communities within the community. For example, air or noise pollution, source material for batteries or solar panels. The application should also outline plans to minimize and mitigate potential negative impacts. Next theme is interconnection. Applications for projects requiring grid connection or other forms of offtake agreement should demonstrate the process for interconnection, a partnership with the identified utility to achieve the proposal, and the metrics that govern any interconnection or offtake agreements. Applications should include the regulatory process required to provide electricity to the grid and all requirements and rules established by the regulator and the utility for new interconnection. It should also include the status of the process at the time of the application. In addition, evidence of commitment from the utility or other off-taker that clearly indicates knowledge and capacity of the proposed project and the intent to allow project connection to the grid. Any required offtake agreements, draft or final form, and the details governing any contract, such as power purchase agreements, net metering agreements, storage capacity payments, or other agreements between the project and the utility or off-taker need to be included with the application. And I'll go ahead and pass this back to Alyssa.
Thanks, Lolita. The fourth feedback theme has to do with incomplete applications. All applications must be complete, including the information requested in the FOA. Leaving sections incomplete, including the project overviews, work plans, community benefits plans, and other requested attachments, may render full applications ineligible for review. Fifth is to make sure to include specific community benefits. Applications should clearly explain how their community benefits plans consider community and labor engagement, job and workforce continuity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and the Justice 40 initiative. DOE strongly encourages applicants to include in their proposals frequent and extensive consultation with local community and labor stakeholders with a potential interest in the proposed sites. Applications should also include plans for monitoring environmental effects of proposed projects, from site assessment through commissioning and throughout the entire life of the project. Sixth is page limits and content requirements. Please review FOA section 4.0 on submission requirements. Full applications must conform to the content and form requirements listed and must not exceed the stated page limits. Specifically, project and community benefits section only allows for 18 total pages. When the project plan file is submitted, any material provided beyond that 18 pages will not be reviewed. Seventh is the proposed project objectives. Please review FOA section 1.2 goals, particularly the objectives of section 40103C3. That's the slide 9 that Regina reviewed earlier, to ensure that the full application is responsive to the FOA. Eighth is the funding amounts. FOA section 1.3 states that this FOA has one topic area. At least 500,000 and at most 5 million are the funding amounts for this topic area. OSED will only provide federal funding for projects between 500,000 and 5 million. A full application submission with a budget requesting federal funds below 500,000 will be deemed non-responsive and not reviewed. A full application submission with a budget requesting federal funds exceeding 5 million will be reviewed, but no applicant should anticipate an award of greater than 5 million under this FOA. And with that, I'll pass it back to Regina.
Thank you very much, Alyssa and Lolita. So I am going to break down the next steps, and thank you all for listening to this point. Looking ahead, moving toward full applications, just a reminder that only those applicants who submitted eligible pre-applications and received our invitation will be eligible to submit a full application. You'll have approximately 8 weeks from our invitation to prepare and submit that full application, and those invitations were sent on September 1st. You will use the OSIT Exchange platform to submit the full applications. And just note that regardless of the date that eligible and invited pre-applicants reviewed their invitation, the date that is noted on the cover of the FOA is our ultimate deadline. And I'll go over that with emphasis in a moment. First, let me break down the criteria for you. So the full applications, as you would read in the FOA, will be reviewed based on 4 criteria this time. Community benefits plan is worth 30%. The work plan also is worth 30%. The technical merit, the application, is worth 20%, and the final 20% relates to financial viability. So please take note that all applicants must submit their full applications by October 26th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next slide, please. I want to tell you a little bit about technical assistance. We referenced it earlier, and it's just another part of the offerings of our program, ultimately in support of clean energy generation systems. So the graphic you see here is straight from our FOA, the grant FOA that we've been talking about. This schematic was intended to help applicants think through the potential funding vehicles that we're offering, this grant FOA, other FOAs, etc., and the technical assistance we fund that might be helpful to you out there. So I'm going to talk about 2 separate types of technical assistance that we're funding. And in both cases, there are possibilities to being connected with local technical expertise as well. So the first type of technical assistance we're funding, you'll see pictured there on the lower left, is a type of technical assistance center that we have partnered with the Environmental Protection Agency to support throughout the United States. So it has a long name and a nice acronym, the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. We call them the TIC-TACs. So there will be 17 of these TIC-TACs, Technical Assistance Centers, located throughout the United States and organized by EPA region. Each of those centers will receive at least $10 million. Their overall goal, their broader environmental justice mandate, is to try to remove barriers and improve accessibility for communities who have environmental justice concerns. That includes our clean energy demonstration efforts through this program. The centers can help highlight local technical expertise as well. Each of those centers has many other organizations that they're connected to and supporting further within their regions. Many of the TIC-TACs are open for business already. They've opened up this summer. So they have intake forms on their websites, and you can go there to access and learn more about them. We are linked to these TIC-TACs on our ERA program website, and we'll go over the websites at the end. The second type of technical assistance that we funded through this ERA program is called the ERA Technical Assistance for State, Local, and Tribal Governments. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado is managing that, collecting and providing expertise across various National Department of Energy laboratories. So for this $50 million grant FOA that we've talked about in this webinar, only the successful pre-applicants are invited to submit a full application. Just repeating that. Those who are invited to submit the full application can have up to 8 hours of technical assistance through this ERA technical assistance program that our national laboratories are putting on. Next slide, please. So a little bit about our resources generally. And I want to start with a disclaimer. There's a really important limitation that we are all very cognizant of in the program. The Department of Energy personnel, including us, are prohibited from communicating or writing or otherwise with applicants about this FOA, except through a structured, established question and answer process. We take questions in this structured process about the FOA specifically via a web handle, and email address is here, and I will read out. It's eragrant@hq.doe.gov. So you need to submit questions no later than 3 business days prior to a deadline, an application due date and time. And please note that we will not provide answers on individual concepts or individual project inquiries through that Q&A process. We will post all of our answers to the questions on the Exchange website. It's there in our program offerings. And make sure that you identify the specific FOA number. In the case of this grant FOA we're talking about, it's 3045, FOA 3045 to view questions and answers specific about this FOA. We'll attempt to respond to questions within 3 business days unless there's a similar question and an answer that's already been posted there on Exchange. Questions related to the registration process or the use of the OSID Exchange platform should be submitted to a different email address. It's osid-exchange support@hq.doe.gov, and it's here on the slide. Please, there too, don't forget to include the FOA name and number in your subject line. Look back to the FOA, refer there for the definition of the terms that we're using and any additional information about requirements. You'll look there for additional post-application submission information as well. And I want to flag that there is a separate frequently asked question document on the program webpage that may be useful for you. I want to thank you for your attention. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor back to Taniqua to close us out. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Regina, and thanks to all of our speakers. On behalf of the entire ERA team, we thank all the attendees for listening to the webinar and all pre-application applicants for the incredible amount of interest shown for this ERA grant opportunity. Now, the recording of this webinar will be posted to the OSID website within the next couple weeks for you to refer back to at any time. As a reminder, the FOA remains the controlling document. If any information in the webinar was presented differently from the FOA will be your guiding document, and applicants should refer to the FOA. Again, thank you for attending.